Hi, and welcome to Upgraded Biology. My name is Dr. Tammy Moralia, and I'm your host. Upgraded Biology is the outcome of 20 years of practicing functional medicine and specializing in hormones. This podcast is where we will present all the information and tools I've learned and continue to learn on how to harmonize and optimize all aspects of your health. Before we begin, I'd like to emphasize that this podcast is separate from my medical practice, BioThrive, where I practice as a physician. It is, however, part of my desire to bring free information to the general public so that each listener is able to step more fully into their role as the CEO of their own health and upgrade their own biology. I am so excited to share my very dear friend and colleague today with you. His name is Alex Charfin. He's the author of the Entrepreneurial Personality Type and the CEO of Simple Operations. He helps tens of thousands of entrepreneurs with 6, 7, 8-figure businesses to grow and scale. Today, Alex has created multiple multi-million-dollar companies, learned a lot along the way, and is teaching entrepreneurs how they can do the same. He shares his journey with others, and Alex writes for some pretty amazing publications like Success, Entrepreneur, and Inc. magazine. And his story has also garnered attention from major media outlets like MSNBC, CNBC, Fox News, US Today, Wall Street Journal, HuffPost, The Investor. Oh my gosh, so many. As a result of his mentorship and success, Alex is now known as the go-to person for helping entrepreneurs ascend the billionaire code and understand how to plan strategically. Throughout all of this, his mission is to empower entrepreneurs to grow and scale their businesses and make their greatest contribution. And Alex has got some really cool challenges like the Thirst Challenge and some other things he's going to share with you, breathing, meditation, that I think that no matter what you do for work, whether it's for someone else or for yourself, I think that you're going to up level not just your health, but also your work life. Welcome, Alex. I'm so happy you're here.
Oh, it's great to be here, Tammy. Thanks for having me.
So we've known each other a long time now.
A long time. I was just thinking about that the other day. I think it's approaching a decade or something like that.
Yeah, I accosted you at a conference. You were speaking, and I was like, I have to meet this guy. He gets it. And one of the things that I felt like you got was just community and communication from the heart. You were so transparent. You were so honest. You were just so real. And when you're at these big conferences, with Tony Robbins and Shark Tank and all these people, and you're sharing the stage with them, it's quite a polished performance that you see over and over and over again. And if you go to them over and over again, you'll actually hear the same presentation over and over again. And so to hear the rawness of your health journey that was intimately linked to your entrepreneurial journey was inspiring to me. So much so that I ended up using your services to learn how to take care of my business so that I could take care of my patients better.
Yeah.
What?
Well, Tammy, I've been an entrepreneur for a long time, and I'm 49 years old. And in my 20s, I ran what most people would call a very successful consultancy. And it was successful financially. We did very good for our members or for our clients, the people that we worked with. We did a ton of really great work, but I did it at my own expense. And in my 20s, I didn't take any time off. I didn't really have a system around how to manage my team. I was doing everything by force of personality, working a ton, really working about 7 days a week. It was exchanging kind of my energy, my efforts for the success of the business. And by the time I was 30, I was over 300 pounds. My waist was well over 44 inches. I was on 4 medications, and I was just seeing a doctor to get 2 more, or what he thought were going to be 2 more that I was going to need. And and I remember thinking like I couldn't keep it up because something was going to break. And that doctor told me that even though at the time we were in South Florida and he had an aging population of patients, that I was his most likely case for a heart attack at 30 years old.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so, yeah, he's like, "You're the one. You're the one out of all the people that I see that I think about." And I knew something had to change, and so it really created a massive shift, really in what I was doing, but also how I approach things.
So what happened first
What happened first, as far as
for
like
your
once
health?
once I had
Yeah,
that
once you had your
conversation?
aha. I mean, I think that that's people come to their aha moments either through disease, diagnosis, some kind of a scare. Sometimes they get inspired to have an
Mm,
aha moment, but normally it's through something like you have, somebody saying, if you don't make a change. But the next step is often confusing because there's so much information. If you go to your regular doctor, they're just going to start on an allopathic medication symptom oriented path that really may not change. You just have to look at the obesity rates of people who've been trying to lose weight for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So, what
yeah.
did you do first?
Are you ready to transform your wellness routine? Picture stepping into a sauna that not only reaches 185 degrees, but does so using both infrared and traditional steam technology, working together for the ultimate detox and sauna experience. No more choosing between one or the other. With Finnmark Designs, you get both. We have partnered with Finnmark Designs, the highest rated sauna manufacturer, to bring you the absolute best. Finnmark produces saunas that are built to last over 25 years, crafted with antimicrobial Western Canadian cedar and equipped with UL-listed infrared heaters, ensuring that the experience is both safe and luxurious. This isn't just a sauna, it's an investment in your health, vitality, and peace of mind. When you choose Finnmark Designs, you're joining thousands of satisfied customers who've made the change and are feeling the benefits every day. Ready to upgrade your biology with a sauna? Go to upgradedbiology.com/sauna. Finnmark Saunas, where luxury, reliability, and wellness come together.
But the next step is often confusing because there's so much information. If you go to your regular doctor, they're just going to start on an allopathic medication symptom oriented path that really may not change. You just have to look at the obesity rates of people who've been trying to lose weight for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So, what
Yeah.
did you do first?
Tammy, that was such a wake up call for me that I would say, like, what didn't I do? I've always looked at things like, if you want to make massive change in your life or in your business, I'm a big fan of saying, oh, there's this one thing that I can modify, but I also think sometimes there has to be an abundance of activity or abundance of energy that goes towards something. So after I left his office that day, I had a heart to heart with myself for a couple of days. And in my teens, I had been a bodybuilder. I'd been in really good shape, so I knew some of what to do. Um, I knew that I needed to get hydrated and like really focus on drinking water. I wasn't at the time. I was drinking a ton of coffee and then Diet Coke and all kinds of other stuff that had chemicals and stimulants in it. So what I did first was I put together a plan, and it was a plan for myself. It was a lot of hydration, getting up and walking and moving every day, going to the gym at least 5 days a week, and then I started eating whole foods. And really eating whole foods, but with an emphasis on putting the right whole foods instead of just eating whatever. And it was funny, Tammy. I was on I was on 5 medications. It was either 4 or 5, and then getting 2 or 3 more. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was too much. And I was on a blood pressure medication, a heart medication, an asthma med, and a medication to help me sleep. And then I can't remember what we were adding. And I left his office, made tons of lifestyle changes, and stopped taking the medications over the course of the next few weeks, and went back and saw him about 60, maybe 75 days later. And everything had shifted. Like, not everything had resolved, but things were moving massively in the right direction. And I remember him saying, like, look, all the medications are working. And I'm like, well, here, let me share with you. I'm not taking them. And here's what I'm doing. And I said, here are all the things. And I was really excited to share with him, Tammy. I was like, I want you to understand, here's what I did so you can tell your patients. And so I started listing off everything that I did. And he started laughing, and he's like, yeah, that's great. It's great you did it, but most people won't do that. And so it was this really weird experience of like, man, I figured something out. You guys should, you should be telling people to do this instead of taking more pills. And he kind of laughed at me. It was a funny moment for him that, I thought that this was the solution. And so I didn't see that doctor for a lot longer after that.
I bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that doctors do get discouraged because they don't see they do give some instructions like, oh, you need to go for a walk, you need to, not eat sugar, things like that. And then the follow-up appointment, which is 10 minutes, reports that nothing has changed. Well, I've learned something recently, or relearned it. Have you ever heard of that study, the rat study, which was a study of addiction? And they put a rat in a box with nothing in it, and there was two bottles of water, one bottle of water with drugs in it. I don't know whether it was cocaine or heroin or something quite
I think it was
addictive.
cocaine.
Yeah, and then the other was water. And then they actually saw that most rats would actually choose the water with the drug in it to the point of killing themselves. And
Yeah.
then some researcher said, yeah, but is it that the rat is alone? What if we put the rat into like rat heaven box where they had fun activities and food and warmth and they could have sex with somebody and they just had this great time? Would they still be drawn to the drugs? And so they did this experiment again, and it was vastly different. And I think that being overweight and having ill health is not an addiction, but it's similar, right?
Yeah.
I think the root cause is a lack of connection and a lack of community. And so even though you go to the doctor and you get the instructions, where's the help? Where's
Yeah.
the support? Now you're unique, right? You made a decision and you decided to go do it. But I noticed you said you went to a gym, so there's a community there. Uh,
Yeah.
and so I think that finding a community, that's why we have our membership, so people can just continuously have that support, because 10 minutes isn't enough to make life altering changes.
Yeah, Tammy, I wish I had met you way back then because for years, I tried different things and I tried things that I thought were healthy and weren't really healthy for me. I ended up throwing like even as I was getting more fit and I was getting back in shape, there was a period of time where I went completely vegan and not knowing that that was uh, not the right way to eat for somebody with my body type. And also, I was, because I was vegan, I was eating a ton of soy and a ton of like vegan type of processed foods. And so I didn't have that help, that support. It was kind of trial and error. And I didn't really find functional medicine until really recently, like probably the last decade of my life. We're talking 20 years ago yeah, 19 years ago when I went through that major change. And having the advice of someone like having your advice, especially in the past few years, but really getting blood tests and seeing evidence of what's going on and understanding what's happening and knowing what's really, if things are improving or they're not going the right direction, it makes everything so much easier. But if you go back 20 years, there wasn't a lot of people offering anything close to the type of membership that there's not a lot of people that offer the type of membership you have, period, still. But 20 years ago, that just wasn't available. And so, I was kind of at the mercy of that traditional doctor system. And I know doctors get discouraged, and so that's why they kind of treat everybody the same. But at the same time, I think sometimes as a patient, it can be really discouraging too to just be told like, take this pill. And I remember him saying things like, well, this is genetic, or this is something that, probably comes from your parents, and so it's kind of starts to feel like a foregone conclusion. Like there's not a lot you can influence with it. So it was interesting to understand just how much I could.
And I think that now there's a different problem. Before you couldn't find the information. Now you can find too much
Too
information.
much. Yeah.
And you'll find a summit, a cleanse, a class, a kit that one size still is trying to fit all. And I get it because it's very difficult to offer customized, test result oriented, precise medicine and recommendations one by one by one to a lot of people. but that's my lane. That's what we've decided to do. Test, don't guess. The longer I'm a doctor, the more I realize we're not all the same. One size does
Yeah.
not fit all. Do you know I have patients who test, they have a food sensitivity test, and they're sensitive to salmon. Like
Yeah.
their body forgot to read the textbook. It's like, no, 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 no. You're not supposed to be allergic to salmon or avocado. But the longer I do this, the more I realize that if you aren't having somebody look under the hood, then you could be doing something that is right, but it might not be right for you, and it might not be right for you right now because we have
Yeah.
different things going on in our body at different stages of our lives. So let's talk about, let's start with hydration because you probably, I remember when you came in to Seattle, I was astounded at the amount of water that you drink. In fact, I was feeling preparedly guilty getting like Alex is gonna
Okay.
be on. I
Look at yours
gotta
compared to mine.
right? Like look at that. Holy moly. And that's one of and your kids do it. I mean, you have habituated hydration into your life. Tell me what started that. Tell me what you've learned. And I'm going to take a sip while I listen.
So, Tammy, when I was going through that period of like trying to figure out how to make things better, I didn't feel like I was getting a lot of answers the way that I do with you. I didn't feel like I was getting a lot of answers from me personally. I didn't feel like I was getting a lot of clarity. And so I started doing a ton of research. And for some reason, the like hydration and water kept calling to me because I kept reading stuff in like medical journals, like when somebody's not fully hydrated, they're not fully engaged. When you're not fully hydrated, your metabolism slows down. When you're not fully hydrated, your body's taking on toxicity. So to me, the converse of those things were what I wanted at that time in my life. So I wanted to learn how to be hydrated. And I'm one of those very different, not very different. I'm one of those people that goes down rabbit holes. Like if I start studying something, I can occasionally study something so much that when I'm around people who are experts in that discipline or have the degree, they often think I'm one of them just because I spent way too much time looking at stuff. Clearly don't have the same knowledge they do, but I can sound like I do. And when it came to water, it just kind of became this obsession because at one point I looked at the top 20 prescription drugs in the United States and then the symptoms of dehydration, and they correlate, every single one of them. And so I think in a lot of ways, we might be treating dehydration in the world. We might be ignoring the fact that we just need more water. There's tons of surveys and tons of studies that show that. And so for me, it was how do I get myself to naturally drink more water? Because here's at the beginning, I would have to choke it down. And I was setting timers to remind like 30-minute timers to remind myself to drink water. And I would repeatedly look up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and realize I hadn't had water all day. And I was getting a little bit of a headache and I was a little irritable and frustrated and felt stuck. And so in all of the obsession that I had around drinking water, I created a really short protocol that I've now shared with thousands of entrepreneurs. It's kind of funny. Doctors' offices use it in their like patient intake. I've had a couple of MDs who wrote books. They actually asked me for permission to repeat the protocol, but it's a 10-day natural thirst challenge that we've created. Somewhere around 10,000 something people have taken it with us directly, and it's a process of drinking nothing but water for 10 days, waking up every morning and having 16 ounces or more, keeping water with you. And if you think about water, you look at your water bottle, anything else you drink. So three things: drinking 16 ounces or more, and then just drinking water only for 10 days. The keeping water with you, and if you think drink, and what happens is you start actually drinking more water. I do it about every 60 days. I'll go 10 days with just water to keep that instinct alive
Are you
and
talking
don't feel
about a
thirsty.
water fast for 10 days? Like no
No,
food?
no, no, just
When you say
no.
only water, you mean out of liquids that go into your body.
There you
It's
go. Yeah.
only water that goes in, but
I
you're
need to
still
always say
eating.
that the two things, yeah, two things. One is it's not a water fast, it's just drinking water. And it's also not a drinking contest. Like sometimes people come in and do it and they'll say, oh, I'm going to drink X number of ounces a day. What I would rather see people do is start learning what thirst feels like, because this as a physician, the thirst instinct is a subtle instinct. the instinct to breathe is a very strong instinct. If anybody was cut off from oxygen for more than a few seconds, you're going to start seeing how strong that instinct is to breathe. The instinct to drink water is a very subtle instinct. Our body doesn't remind us over and over again. It doesn't go into panic mode. It'll actually put up with dehydration for a long time. And so if we go 10 days where we just drink water and nothing else, we can eat whatever we want, but you'll find yourself eating healthier. And then you have water with you all the time. Like there's a 100% chance you're not going to drink water if you don't have it. So if you have it with you, you'll think about it more often. And then if you look at it or you think about it or you have this, oh, maybe I should get a drink, it is always a yes. And then you drink 16 ounces or more. And it's funny, Tammy, just that protocol, people have come back and said they've lost weight. Like some people lose 4 or 5 pounds in a day, somewhere in that 10-day period. It's a release of inflammation. But when you look at what dehydration does, dehydration causes inflammation and muscle soreness and pain and issues with cognition, issues with thinking, issues with mood control. When we reverse those things, it's crazy what's happened in just 10 days with people.
But I think it's interesting. People don't realize that your body is trying to tell you you're thirsty, like you're talking about, like that thirst drive. And oftentimes people will eat something instead of drinking something when they're actually thirsty, because your body is trying to say to you, oh, you usually drink when you have something to eat, so I'm going
Yeah.
to give you a nudge. And then they eat instead of drink, and it gets even worse.
Yeah.
It's
I always tell people that if you feel like you're hungry and you're being driven to eat, you're probably thirsty.
right.
You're probably
And try that
dehydrated.
first. I mean, what's the
Yeah.
downside of drinking first?
Yeah.
And our bodies are kind of, I tell this to my weight loss patients, they're kind of like glorified toilets with regard to weight loss. Have you ever like poured water into a toilet and it automatically flushes? You don't have to
Yeah.
press the plunger. Well, it's kind of like that. Like our bodies will start flushing fat cells out if we just continue to hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. The other thing that I want to talk about, which ties into one of your other passions, which is breath and meditation, is that our
Mm.
cells are, we are so much water. We are made out of so much fluid. And the interesting thing about fluid is its ability to conduct electricity. Now, I have this philosophy that we have three pillars of our health, and if you've got all three pillars optimized, there's nothing that can rock your health. You are going to just feel and look and function fabulously. If you have two, it only takes a job loss, a relationship breakup, or a worldwide pandemic to get or
Or
feel
maybe a recession.
right, or get or feel sick. And if you have only one, then you probably already have a diagnosis or feel sick. And those are structure and chemical and energy. And so the structure, if you have a broken leg, you're going to have to get that fixed. There's just no two ways about it, right? And then the chemical part of it, that's the hormones. People forget that our nutrition gets broken down into chemicals, chemicals outside of our body. All of those are messengers. But the last thing is never talked about or taught in traditional medical school, and that's the electricity, the frequency, the energy. Every single cell in our body has an electrical charge. If you had something wrong with your brain, I would check an EEG and check the frequency of your brain. If you had something wrong with your heart, I would check an EKG. I would check the electricity of your heart. We are electric beings. But you only have to be told once, don't go in the swimming pool in a lightning storm, to realize how well water conducts electricity. So hydration can really help that electricity. But it's interesting to me, the work that I've done with Dr. Joe Dispenza and my meditation practice, is that we can actually change that electrical flow in our body through changing our frequency in meditation. Tell
Mhm.
me what you've learned about that, because I know you have gone from hydration and then breath and then meditation, and it's a big part of what I talk about. But you can share some personal experiences, because, of course, everybody thinks I'm going to say it's great because
Yeah,
I'm
no
the
doubt.
doctor.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as an entrepreneur, I've been become obsessed with optimization. And I think I have been since I was young. And that came from a childhood of really not having great health. And so when you grow up constantly in the doctor's office, always sick, overhearing conversations where it sounds like like that's how it's always going to be. I think I got really obsessed with like, how do I make things better? And when I first started on this journey, it was more of like, what are the tactical things that I'm doing? What do I put in my mouth? How many calories am I burning? I was counting macros. I was doing a lot of stuff that I don't really do anymore, because I didn't understand. And what I didn't realize early on was how massive, massive an impact how you feel and what you're thinking has on everything else. I've worked with so many entrepreneurs that to the outside world appear wildly successful, but on the inside are falling apart and damaged and frustrated and completely overwhelmed. And when you get into that state, it's like you can see it happening. I watch people go from overwhelmed to overwhelmed and not feeling well to overwhelmed and sick to now sick. And then what's interesting is sometimes the overwhelm goes away because the business fails, and then they come back and they start feeling better again and they start like moving in the right direction. And I think for all of us, understanding how to stay out of that energetic of overwhelm, understanding how to stay in a more present, more grounded space is just crucial. And so along with studying water, I started studying breathing. And I didn't realize it, but I've been doing breath work since I was a kid. So probably about 15, 16 years old, I learned some ways to like calm the body. But I've taken it to an entirely different level. I've now had a few different breathwork coaches. I work with one every week where I go to a group program on actually tonight, Wednesday nights, where we do breathing in a group for about a half hour. And what it's done for me is I now know that I can change my state from wherever it is to one that's much healthier in a very short period of time, just through moving the breath and just through using breathwork tactics. I know that if I'm in a place where there's anxiety or frustration or irritation, I can immediately calm those things down in my body so that I have more capacity to work with to get through that situation. And then when it comes to meditation, it's funny, right before we started recording this podcast, I ran up and did a 10-minute meditation up in my room. And that ability to calm everything and be able to process. I think a lot of people, when I hear a lot of people talk about meditation, it's like, oh, I go into this void, I think nothing, I think about, and I'm not that meditator. When I was younger, I remember somebody trying to teach me how to meditate, and they're like, think of a blank sheet of paper, now zoom in on the middle and you'll think of nothing. And I'm like, no, I'm thinking about the lighting and what table is it on? How did I zoom in? What type of paper is
What's
it?
for dinner?
How
Oh
thick is
crap,
it?
I gotta go to the grocery store. I'm so frustrated.
Right. So I like a long time ago, I wouldn't sit and say that I necessarily gave up on not thinking about anything, but for me, meditation is more of being in a place where there's stillness and then seeing what comes up and then understanding it and then moving on and seeing what comes up and understanding and moving on. And sometimes I get to the point where like so much has come up and it moves on that I do get to that place of complete stillness. But even if I go meditate where it's active and there's a lot going on and I have to like work through and process a lot, I just kind of let it happen. And I find that when I'm done, I'm more grounded. I feel better. There's more energy there. I can go from being exhausted and not wanting to do anything to feeling like I can check back in and be productive.
I love that description. Getting your mind to stop having thoughts and stop that activity. We need to find the person that taught that is meditation, and we need to sit them
Uh,
down and we need to teach them physiology, because you can no more stop your mind from having thoughts than you can stop your heart from beating. It
yeah.
just happens. But that ability to observe and let it go, it's kind of like we're pressure cookers, and the meditation is the time where we take the lid off and we let it go, and it doesn't build
Yeah.
up and build up and build up and build up. And so that is cleaning all of the cells. Literally, different chemicals are released, different hormones are released when you allow that process. And especially when you combine a meditation with a few minutes of breathing first. I am learning so much about breath.
Mm.
The mouth taping at night has been a complete game changer. 100% of the people that I have told about mouth breathing, including myself and my husband, is like, no, I'll suffocate. But we don't suffocate at night when we breathe through our nose. And did you know, you probably know, but the bones of the face and the sinuses are malleable for our whole life. So you could
Yeah.
actually look better cosmetically um, by breathing through your nose at night, because when you breathe through your mouth, all this gets elongated and all this caves in. And so when you're taping, it's opening up all of this and you're getting that heart-shaped, youthful structure. In addition to
Yeah.
nitric oxide, which is going to vasodilate, and anti-inflammatory, which is produced in the sinuses from breathing through your nose all night. And then you were also talking about how you can change your state. It's that diaphragm, just taking those big breaths, because the diaphragm turns on the parasympathetic rejuvenation nervous system, but it's also the CO2. Our breath is so linked to CO2. And when you actually address the accumulation of CO2, because people start breathing more rapidly and more shallowly, even though they don't
Yeah. And
realize
they
it.
take on more
Yeah,
CO2.
and you're
Yeah.
retaining more and more CO2. Well, they found CO2 receptors in the amygdala, which is the freak out part of the
Mm.
brain. That's
Yeah.
the fight or flight and the anxiety. So just allowing that can actually reset the chemical balance. There's so many things. How can people, you said you set a reminder, is how did you become able to remember these things? I mean, getting habits, you create habits, you teach entrepreneurs to create habits in business, your morning huddle, your important numbers, your statistics, habit, and then you did it at first with the water. How do you help people? We're trying to help people be the CEO of their own health. How do you create a habit of breath and meditation? How do you start?
For me, Tammy, it's really just about creating the habit of having a morning
Mm.
routine. And in both cases, I have a morning and an evening routine.
So it's
And
scheduled.
that breath works in both of them.
So it's scheduled.
It's right here. It's actually written, and every day I go through it. And there's a bunch of detail here because I'm forgetful and my mind's always somewhere else. So if I can take process and spell it out in a way that I don't have to think about it, then it actually gets done. But there's breath work and meditation in my morning and breath work and meditation in my evening. And, I agree with what you said about mouth taping and nasal breathing. That's why I do breath work right before I go to bed, so that I'm actually opening up those passageways and letting my body know, like, we're going to bed, and I'm going to be breathing through my mouth. Also, for those who are new to it, using a breathe right strip that pulls your nostrils apart can actually make things a little bit easier when you first start out. That was something I did for years. I don't really have to do it anymore. I actually went from having really constrained nasal breathing to now having it be wide open, and I can even work out all nasal breathing, so I'm getting that nitric oxide like you were talking about. Unless I'm doing really hard cardio, I can breathe through my nose. I can even jog and breathe through
Wow.
my nose. And so that happened
Yeah.
over time. Like that, like when you say that this area is malleable and it changes, most people don't know. Like the more you do it, the more you
Yeah.
can do it. And then what you brought up about CO2 tolerance is so important. So I have a coach who talks about CO2 and how a lot of the time we think we're breathing because our body needs more oxygen, but the body's actually breathing to expel
Yeah.
CO2 and to balance CO2 levels. And one of my favorite practices is CO2 tolerance. It's where you do some circular breathing, so breathing in and out, and then you breathe all the way out, so there's nothing in the lungs, and you see how long you can hold it. And my coach calls it microdosing on the fear of death, because as soon as you start holding your breath, there's this like reactivity and panic that comes over you. It's so uncomfortable. But what I've done now for a few years is like that practice of getting to the point where I'm oxygenated, and then I just hold it and the CO2 levels start dropping. You can feel your body get uncomfortable. And I went from where initially I could only put up with that discomfort for maybe 20 or 30 seconds. These days, I often go over a minute and a half or two
Wow.
minutes. And what that's translated to in my life is that purposely stepping into discomfort and then knowing that I can tolerate it, because that it's not that I've gotten better at it, it's better I've gotten it, and now I trust it more and I can tolerate it better. It's actually made it easier in my life when I'm feeling reactive or there's something going on. I find myself not being as reactive. I find myself not as triggered by something that
It's like
happens
stress
just by
training.
the simple
It's like stress
practice.
training.
You what?
And you're
Oh, it is.
literally doing stress training not just for being able to tolerate that feeling. You're literally changing the receptors in the amygdala for the CO2 so that your body no longer has a knee-jerk reaction to freaking out and you can actually tolerate stress. And isn't that a key to health and happiness? Is our ability to navigate stress smoothly. You know, you can put a potato and
Yeah.
an egg in boiling water, and one gets hard and the other gets soft. It's not the
Yeah.
environment, it's how you react to it. So I love
Yeah.
that. You have your list, and I was like, oh my gosh, I went to your course, and I was like, okay, he's like a little OCD crazy. I'm not going to do that. I can't do that, And then I'm like, okay, you're either going to try this or you're not. What do you have to lose? Your current system is making you feel overwhelmed with all you have to do as a mom and a doctor and an entrepreneur, so why not? Challenge. So I did. And you know what was one of the things I learned is I actually have a secret thought that I'm superwoman and that I can accomplish 5 trillion things in one day. And when I had to list it out, I'm like, damn, the day is gone. I I
Yeah.
can't get all this done and I didn't feel like a failure anymore.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Tammy. I have entrepreneurs often tell me, like, when I finally committed it to paper, I realized why I never do it. Because there was finally clarity as to, like, there was just way too much there. And when if we're willing to go from having everything in our head and having, and a lot of times for people like us, the timing is all at once and right away. It's like, here's a million things that I want, and when do you want them?
Now's
Right
my
now or
favorite word.
yesterday.
Yes, ask my family.
Right, like deliver right now, yeah. And but if when we're willing to write some things down and to keep track of what's going on, we start seeing more realistically what we can get done, and then we set up patterns where we succeed
And
instead of
then when you
fail.
review it, the next day when you review the previous day, the other thing that I often do is I think that something is going to take 5 minutes and it takes an
Yep.
hour. And I just didn't budget for it. So it's a beautiful way. Now, do you prep your day the day before or in the morning? So when do you create
I
in
do
the
it in the
morning?
morning.
Yeah. I do
Yeah,
mine the night
yeah,
before.
it's
It's
part of my
just because
morning
that's
routine.
the time that I have for myself. The morning's so busy with the girls and the dog and the
I think that's mostly
yeah.
personal preference. I've seen people be really successful with either
As long as
one.
you do it.
I think it's and if it,
As long as you
huh?
actually do it.
As long as you do it. That's what I was gonna say. It's like it's either one as long as you're just doing it consistently.
Oh, I love these tips to be a CEO because your life is about teaching people to be better CEO of their life, and my job is to help people be the CEO of their own health. And the tools are very, very, very similar. In fact, I often feel like our total health membership is very much like a coach, like a business coach, but it's actually a health coach, somebody who's going to help you evaluate, take a look at the numbers. It's very similar. I often think that your body and your business are hand in hand.
I think you're right, Tammy. I just think that, outside of what you provide and a couple of other people that I know who have similar programs, it's very hard as an individual to know that you're optimizing and to know that you're actually moving in the right direction. My experience prior to working with you and a couple of the other functional medicine doctors that I've worked with is that you work with doctors that take anecdotal information from an appointment, make decisions, and then you come back and they take more anecdotal information to make a decision. Anybody who runs their business that way quickly finds their business not succeeding because they're not using data, they're not using metrics, they're not looking at what's actually happening and making decisions based on reality. And so when I look at what you do with the total health membership, it's, it's getting not just a million tests, it's getting the right tests, then understanding how to evaluate those tests, then making adjustments based on that information, and then coming back and retesting to see what's going on. And I look at that a lot, like what we do in businesses. We show them what numbers to look at, what frequency to look at them with which to look at them, and then what types of decisions they should be making based on the numbers that they're getting. And I agree. There's huge similarities there, but like the level of efficacy of running a business the right way or running your health the right way, it's just not going to be there if you don't have the right process. And that's what I think is, it's like really important for people to understand that if you don't have the right process with that person there, that coach to interpret it for you. I mean, I love the analogy of doctor as coach, because I think in so many places, in so many worlds, it's doctor as boss, or a doctor as,
Instead of a
right?
partner.
Doctor as guru. Doctor as like, yeah, it's certainly not coach or partner or person who's helping me through this. And so I think, yeah, I like that
Yeah.
analogy a lot. And I know that's what it's
And
done
I
for
think
me.
people need to remember that they can fire their doctor. It's a team and they actually work for you. And if you can't talk to them, if you can't
Yeah.
ask questions, if you can't request tests, if you can't be curious, and if they're not leading you down a path of looking under rocks that aren't problems yet, just so that we can make sure they don't become problems. But there's a difference between waiting until something's wrong and optimizing. And that's again another business
100%.
differentiation, right? Who wants to just make enough to pay payroll and rent? The purpose of
Yeah.
business is to
Yeah.
grow, right? And so the purpose, people think, oh, I'm going to just get more and more unhealthy as I get older. Actually, we've there's so much going on in the world right now. There's regenerative medicine, there's stem cell medicine, there's natural um, supplements, there's food, there's so much that we have yet to discover. DNA that can be changed by epigenetics, by the choices we make. So it's an
Mm.
exciting time. I wanted to ask you, I always ask our guests to share a favorite book that our listeners might be blessed by. One of your favorite books.
Trying to think of what would be a good book for your listeners, Tammy. I think,
Just a favorite book of yours.
well,
No, you're
I've
free.
got this business book, but it's, yeah, like for me, a lot of my favorite books are business books. But you know what? I'll share a kind of a more obscure book that I really love. There's a book by a guy named Stephen Pressfield. It's called The War of Art, not The Art of War. That's a different one, but The War of Art. And I think everybody should read that book. It's about creation and resistance, and what comes up for us as people who put things out there and who create. And it's just so
I've
well
read
done.
it.
And it's short, it's easy to read.
Yeah,
You've read it, so
yeah.
you know what I'm talking. You can read it 10 minutes at a time, 2 minutes at a time. You can pick it up, read a paragraph, and think about it for 3 days. It's a really extraordinary book that I'm reading now, probably for the fifth or
Oh,
sixth time.
that's a great one. Thank you for reminding me of it. I've got it on my bookshelf so I can actually. It's one of those like just a few pages before bed kind of thing. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, or when you have a couple minutes, just flip through a couple of the pages, and it's almost like every page could create a meditation about your life.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so, so much for sharing all your brilliance with us today. Remember, everybody, health is contagious. So be sure to pass this on to someone that you love. And don't forget to hit subscribe, where you can hear more ways that you can be the CEO of your own health. Have a beautiful day.